Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow. According to information we have, Russia will use nuclear weapons in response to the use of conventional weapons against it or Belarus, creating a threat to sovereignty. This is stated in the Treaty on Security Guarantees within the Union State, which Putin submitted for ratification, which means that soon this agreement is going to have a legal power. Also, according to it, an attack on the country will be considered as an act of aggression against the Union State as a whole. So this is very important document, and this will allow Putin and allow Russia to protect Belarus against Western aggression if Western aggression happens ever. Furthermore, this agreement will allow Putin and Russia to attack Western countries, any of the Western countries with nuclear weapons. And some people are saying that the main purpose of this agreement is just to, let's say, to make these two countries closer, to protect Belarus from possible, let's say, sanctions or possible aggressions from the Western countries. But most of the military experts are saying that the main purpose of this law is to force Belarus to join the special military operation. And if any NATO country decides to attack Belarus while the participation of the special military operation, Russia will attack this Western country with nuclear weapon. Furthermore, today Zelensky himself made a statement regarding this law, and according to him, Putin will start deploying troops in Belarus to drag it into war. Some sources are saying that Putin and Russia is going to, let's say, to deploy forces along the border with Ukraine. Russia is going to repeat the situation, the scenario that took place in the early 2022 when the special military operation started. Maybe Russia wants to force the Ukrainians to keep some forces along the border with Belarus as well, because we know that currently a lot of forces are taking place in the Sudzha direction, in Donetsk. So if Russia can deploy force in Belarus, it will force Ukrainians to do the same, and maybe this situation will ease the progress of the Russian forces in the Sudzha, because as for now the situation in Sudzha is very difficult, and we're seeing that there are no lights in the end of the tunnel that can say us that the situation is going to be changed. Furthermore, regarding Sudzha, we got some very interesting statement made by Zelensky. Ukraine will use Kursk region topic in peace talks. You will see when we reach a diplomatic settlement to end of the war, we will hear what conditions the Russians will have for Ukraine regarding the Kursk direction. This was a very important step, Zelensky said. He is confident that Russia will not be able to drive the Ukraine armed forces out of the Kursk region in the near future. Tomorrow will be 6 months since the beginning of the Ukraine armed forces offensive operation. Maybe there is some truth in his words, but let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the current situation, according to information we have currently, the main clashes are taking place in the area of Sverdlikova. The Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainian forces. Main clashes are taking place for the settlement of Kurilovka, and the Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainians in the area of Martinovka and in the area of the settlement of Cherkasskaya Porечная. But the last change on the ground we saw probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, something like this. Since that moment, nothing has been changed. Just lots of Iskander strikes, Tornado S strikes, and complete FPV drone control over the most of the lines that goes in the Sudzha direction. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction. The pro-Ukrainian sources Deep State published a very interesting article regarding the situation in this area, and telling the truth, the main narrative of this article is that Ukrainians are very afraid of these Russian activities, of this intensifying from the Russian side, and Ukrainians are saying that they hope and they believe that Ukrainians will be able to stop the Russians and to force them to fall back on their side of the river of Oskol, but something tells me that this is not going to happen, and the Russians will continue advancing in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of Chasiv Yar, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. The Russians are about to finish the battle for the central part. The Russians are advancing in the southern part. The clashes are taking place for the territory of Stupochki, for the southern micro district, but as you can see, all these things were stated by different sources, but we see that there are no changes on the ground. As for the Pokrovsk direction, our conclusions we made made during the previous several days are coming true. Ukrainians during the previous days carry out significant number of counterattacks in the direction of the settlements of Kotlin and Pishane. We discussed the situation, and if you remember, we had some doubts whether about the chronology of events, but today everything become clear. Today the Russian source and the Ukrainian sources published more videos from the area of Pishane. For example, this video was published by the Russian side, and in this video we can see how Ukrainians were trying to return back in the direction of Pokrovsk. Most likely this is vehicle first entered the city of Pishane, landed infantry, and then Ukrainians were trying to escape this area, but the Russians destroyed Ukrainian vehicle. Another loss, another minus. And in the second part of the video we can see a few more infantry fighting vehicles retreating and several vehicles that were destroyed on the territory of Pishane itself. The last FPV drone attack took place exactly in this area, which give us information that most likely the Ukrainians managed to enter the settlement of Pishane to land infantry, and most likely this industrial complex either under complete Ukrainian control already, or there are very heavy clashes for this complex. So which means that Ukrainians, after the Russians stopped their offensive operation in the direction of Pokrovsk, after the Russians stopped their attempts to outflank the city of Pokrovsk and to cut several more supply lines, began their own counterattacks, and as a result of these counterattacks that started probably 4 or 5 days ago, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions and to restore control over the lost territories. So the situation here will continue developing, because I'll remind you that Trump accepted Zelensky's offer regarding rare metals, and now if Zelensky wants to sell United States the rare metals, Ukraine needs to restore control over the settlement of Shevchenka, Novopustinka, Novotroitska. So Ukrainians need to restore control over this territory, and this will allow Ukraine to sell rare metals to the United States of America in exchange for support. So which means that during the next several months we're going to see lots of clashes in this area, for this pocket. As for the Andreevka fortified area direction, during the previous 24 hours we got lots of very interesting updates. There are very heavy clashes in this area. Today another Russian source confirmed Russian control over the settlement of Dachne. The Ukrainians abandoned their positions. Maybe today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this information. Another important update is coming from the area of the river of Sukhie Yali. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were counterattacking the Russians in this area. This is also a very important video, and this video most likely confirmed that Ukrainians are trying to maintain the corridors for evacuation, because now the Ukrainians are trying to leave their positions in this pocket after the fall of Dachne. There are I have no doubts Ukrainians will not be able to hold their lines for a very long period of time, but to retreat they need to have lines. They need to have lines, and they need to have secured lines. So that was an attempt to attack the Russians with the purpose to allow the Ukrainians to fall back from the fields. And the most important things are coming from the settlement of Andreevka itself. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. Anyway, I believe that the Russians launched another offensive operation, and during the previous several days there was a very big dynamic. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 4th of February. This is the situation by the end of the 5th of February. The Russians took under control almost the entire eastern part. And this is the situation by the beginning of the 6th of February. The Russians managed to take under control the central part of the settlement, and which means that the town of Andreevka was cut in two, and now the Russians will try to handle with every single part separately. This is the first thing. And the second thing, the Russians managed to reach the most important bridge, the most important road between the town of Constantinople and the town of Andreevka. We're talking about this area. And most likely the Russians managed to establish complete fire or even physical control over this line. If this information is correct, the Ukrainians are about to be encircled completely without any possibilities for further evacuation. So we see that the Russians enters the final phase of the battle for this pocket. And also we continue receiving updates that the Russians resume their attempts to attack the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Velika Novoselovka. During the previous several days, the Russians made more attempts to attack in the direction of the settlement of Bogatyr along the road TO518. The Russians were using vehicles, significant number of them. The Ukrainians published the video how they were bombing and attacking them with the purpose to slow down the Russians and to stop them. As for this attack that you can see in front of your screens, most likely this attack was stopped by the Ukrainians. The Russians suffered losses and were forced to fall back. I don't know what is going to happen next. The sources are saying that in February, the United States of America, Case Kellogg, is planning to present his plan on the 20th of February. He's going to present his plan first in Munich in the security meeting, when countries of Western countries will discuss the security situation in the world, and then he's going to come to Kiev and to publish this plan and to discuss this plan with Zelensky. So anyway, by the end of February, we're going to understand the point of view of the Western countries, how the conflict in Ukraine should be finished. But when talking about Russia and its laws and its situation regarding nuclear weapon, most likely Russia will not accept this offer, will reject this, and will continue the special military operation until the Western countries will accept the demands of the Russian Federation. And that's it for the short video. Military summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.